Welcome to this class of fluid mechanics, and in today's class we will try to understand the physics of the velocity gradient tensor. Before we talk of the velocity gradient tensor, let me just introduce you to another set of very simple matrix operation. If we have any matrix which we refer to, and in this case we'll talk of the matrix as a second order tensor. So if we have any second order tensor Bij, this can be split into two parts, and the first part we call as the symmetric part, where the components are of the form Sij is equal to Sji, and an antisymmetric or skew symmetric part where the components are of the form Aij is equal to minus of Aji. So that means what we are effectively saying is we can write Bij as two parts Sij plus Aij. Sij is the symmetric part and Aij is the antisymmetric or skew symmetric part. Now it's fairly easy to show that Sij we can write as half of Bij plus Bji, and the antisymmetric part Aij can be written as half of Bij minus Bji. And if you can very clearly see, if we add the two, we will get Bij back. And just to illustrate this, we can expand it as B11, B12, B13, B21, B22, B23, B31, B32, B33. And this we can write it as half of B11, B12 plus B21 by 2, B13 plus B31 by 2. This one B21 plus B12 by 2, B22, and then we'll have B23 plus B32 by 2, B31 plus B13 by 2. That means the same as its mirror image about the diagonal. This will be B32 plus B23 by 2 and B33. So this part is Sij with the half, and plus we will have half of, and now this will be B11 minus B11. So the diagonal term will all be 0, and then this will be B12 minus B21 by 2, B13 minus B31 by 2, and this term will be B21 minus B12 by 2. So these two are negative of each other. The diagonal term will be 0, and this will be B23 minus B32 by 2, and this term will be B31 minus B13 by 2, B 3 2 minus B2 3 by 2 and 0. So this will be the antisymmetric part or Aij. And this is Sij, the symmetric part. Now notice in Sij there are 6 independent terms. Why are the terms 6? Because the off-diagonal terms are all equal. So 3 diagonal terms and 3 off-diagonal terms. And the other 3 are the same. And in Aij, we have only 3 independent terms. Why is that so? Because the 3 diagonal terms in Aij are 0 and the other 3 terms off diagonal are related to their mirror images. And actually, if you look at it, Bij was a general 3 by 3 matrix and this had 9 independent terms. So this sort of matches. Now, so this was the sort of maths part of it, that we can divide any tensor into 2 parts, a symmetric part and a skew symmetric part. Now let us get back to the fluid mechanics, and what we had seen in last class was that we had written that Cauchy's equation, which is essentially Newton's second law, and this expressed in terms of velocity field led to the equation, and the equation which we got was rho times partial v by partial t plus v dot grad operating on v is equal to minus grad p plus rho g plus del dot tau ij. And if you recall, this came from the fact that we had split the total stress tensor sigma ij into 2 parts, minus p delta ij plus tau ij. And here this was the isotropic part of the stress tensor, which we called as the pressure, and this was the viscous part of the stress tensor. Now, if we look at this governing equation, we have this term tau ij, which is the viscous stress. And what we would like to do is, we would like to see if can tau ij be expressed as a function of velocity or its derivatives. And actually, it is the modeling of tau ij or full form, if we look at modeling of sigma ij, which makes the difference between solids and fluids. Firstly, in solids, we do not divide the isotropic part, call it the pressure. That is one thing we don't do. And the other major difference is that sigma ij in solids are related to the strain. And this you must have seen, Hooke's law, and then there is the law for shear stresses, etc., that the stresses are related to strain. But in fluids, as we have seen, the stress, or particularly the shear stress, is related to the rate of strain. And when we talk of rate of strain, that is what we would now like to do is, so we have also specified this pressure as a separate part, which is an isotropic part, And one more thing we will realize is, because pressure now is defined as the isotropic part of sigma ij. So now in this moving fluid, pressure is unknown. It is also a dependent variable, because we do not know for, so pressure will also have to be solved for along with the velocity field. But to do that, we first need to find tau ij as a function of the velocity field. Now we realize that tau ij comes into picture only when the fluid deforms and flows over one element to element of fluid. If the fluid particles translate or rotate like a rigid body, then we have seen tau ij is equal to 0. So therefore, what we have to look at is what part of velocity causes tau ij, because we have to relate tau ij to velocity, and clearly something, that part of velocity which is causing, so those part of velocity which causes a fluid to translate or rotate like a rigid body will not cause the viscous stresses tau ij. They will not contribute. So now let us try to understand the role of the velocity gradient. And by velocity gradient, let me write the general term partial ui by partial xj. Now, the way which we have written this, if I write this in the vector notation, this would be gradient of v. Now notice there are two vectors here, grad, which we have written by d by dxj, and the velocity u. So totally partial ui by partial xj has 9 components, with I going from 1 to 3 and j going from 1 to 3. That means it will be, components will be something like partial u1 by partial x, partial u2, partial u1 by partial y, partial u1 by partial z, then partial u2 by partial x, partial u2 by partial y, partial u2 by partial z, and partial u3 by partial x, partial u3 by partial y, partial u3 by partial z, where the velocity vector u is given as u1i plus u2j plus u3k, or we can write it as ui plus vj plus wk. Okay, so now given this, let's try to see. So let us look at a rectangular element of velocity. So I'll draw it in a slightly more The rectangle I'll make more like a square so that the drawing looks a bit easier. So this is a rectangular element of velocity, of fluid, sorry, which we call as ABCD. This is the position of this fluid element at time t is equal to 0. And at time t is equal to delta t, so at t is equal to 0, this is a rectangular element ABCD. At t is equal to delta t, this becomes A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime, and this becomes a quadrilateral because now, and this is placed in a fluid. So this is, we are talking of a fluid where the velocity field V is equal to Ui plus Vj. That means, to illustrate this physically, we are taking a two-dimensional case and we will extend it to 3D. So now this element, because everywhere the fluid has velocity given by Ui plus Vj, at time t plus delta t, this transforms to A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime. So A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime is the new location of A, B, C, D. A moves to A prime, B moves to B prime, C moves to C prime, and D moves to D prime. And in this process, the element translates, let's say it also rotates, its shape changes, and its volume, and in this case the volume will be area per unit length, area multiplied by length, so volume also changes in general. So the element is fully being distorted. So now let me write first the 3 points A, B, D, points on the x and y axis of this element. Now at time t is equal to 0, let's first write the position vectors of point A. Let the position vector of point A be 0, 0, and let the velocity of point A be, at point A be u, b, v. Now the position vector of point B, so this element initially has dimensions delta x times delta y, delta x in the x direction. So the coordinate of point B will be delta x and its y coordinate is 0. And the coordinate of point D, which is the top point, will be 0 times delta y. Now the velocity of point B I can express using a Taylor series. So this will be u plus partial u by partial x times delta x. This is the velocity of point B, and the velocity, the y component of velocity of point B will be v plus partial v by partial x delta x. So this has come from a Taylor series expansion, and we have neglected higher order terms. Higher order terms have been neglected. Similarly, when I go to point D, the velocity there, the x component will be u plus partial u by partial y delta y, and v plus partial v by partial y delta y. So these are the coordinates of point D, the velocity at point D. This is all in terms of a Taylor series. Now, when I want to find the coordinates of point A prime, now the velocity is u comma v. So the x component will have of point A will have moved u delta t. So the coordinate of point A will be, x coordinate will become A prime will be u plus 0 plus u delta t, and the y coordinate of A prime will be 0 plus v delta t. So this is, these are we are writing at time t plus delta t. So this is the coordinates of point A prime. The coordinates of point B prime will be, now the x coordinate will be the whatever delta x was there for B, that was the x coordinate, plus the distance, this whatever is u multiplied by delta t. So plus u plus partial u by partial x delta x multiplied by delta t. So this will be the x coordinate of point B in the new location. And similarly, the y coordinate will be 0 plus v plus partial v by partial x delta x, and we multiply this by delta t. Similarly, the coordinates of d prime, if I write, this will be, the x coordinate initially was 0 plus, it stays 0 plus, now we have to take this velocity u plus partial u by partial y delta y multiplied by delta t. And the y distance will be delta y plus, now it will be v plus partial v by partial y delta y multiplied by delta t. So this is the total x and y coordinates of A prime, B prime and D prime. Now from here what one can see is the x component of A prime B prime will be, if I look at the x component, this will be equal to, so I'm now looking at x component of A prime B prime. So this will be equal to delta x. So I look at A prime B prime, I subtract the two values of x component. So I get delta x plus partial u by partial x delta x delta t. Similarly, the y component of A prime B prime, this will be equal to, now I subtract the two y components, so I will get this as, this y component becomes, this y component will be equal to partial v by partial x delta t. Similarly, I can write x component of, so now we are looking at x component of A prime D prime, A prime D prime, this will be equal to partial u by partial y delta t, and y component of A prime D prime, this will be equal to delta y plus partial v by partial y delta t. Now let's look at some of the, so these are all the dimensions which we have done. Now what we want to find is, if we want to find the strain in the x direction, epsilon xx, this will be the change in length in the x direction divided by length in the x direction of the element. And now the new length in the x direction is delta x plus partial u by partial x delta x delta t. From this I have to subtract the original length in the x direction. So from here I subtract minus delta x divided by the length in the x direction, which is equal to, the original length was delta x. And therefore what I will get is the strain in the x direction is partial u by partial x times delta t. An x component, that means what it shows is that an element which was there, it gets elongated per unit length by an amount delta u by delta x into delta t. Similarly, and you can show this, epsilon y. This will be equal to partial v by partial y times delta t. And this would be an element which is like this. It gets extended to this length. So, and that is the strain is the rate per unit original length. So this was delta y, and this gets extended by this much. So the extension is given by partial v by partial y delta t per unit delta y. So that is how this is the strain. Now in addition to this, we also observe that in the new position, let me draw this. So this is the, let's draw it again. So what I'm going to do is, let me just erase this, and I'll show this in a slightly magnified way so that things become clear. So let this be A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime, where the element has moved. Now A prime, B prime and A prime, D prime, you observe that there is a change of angle, and let's call this angle with respect to the x and x axis. So A prime, B prime makes an angle delta theta 1 with x axis, and A prime, D prime makes an angle delta theta 2 with y axis. Now if I have to work this angle out, what you can see is tangent of delta theta 1 will be equal to the y component of A prime B prime divided by the x component. So this will be equal to partial v by partial x delta t. This was, if you notice, this was the y component of A prime B prime divided by the x component. And the x component of A prime B prime is delta x into 1 plus partial u by partial x delta t. So this is the, now we will make two approximations. Theta 1 is small. We are talking of small angles. So therefore tangent theta 1 is nearly equal to theta 1. So this is one approximation. And secondly, we will know that we have 1 plus partial u by partial x delta t. Now the second term is multiplied by, has a term delta t which tends to 0 in the limit, and as compared to 1, delta t is very small. So therefore in the denominator 1 plus delta u by delta x delta t, we will approximate this to be 1. Notice we are not taking off the delta t in the numerator, because in the numerator there is only one term. Had this been a term like 1 plus partial v by partial x delta t, we would have removed this. So therefore what we get is, from here what we get is delta theta 1, when we look at this, this will be equal to partial v by partial x delta t. Okay, so this is, we get this relation. And similarly, if you work out the angle delta theta 2, do go through the same exercise, that is find tangent of theta 2, and then this will be y component of, x component of A prime D prime divided by y component of A prime D prime, and use the same this thing. This will lead to delta theta 2 is equal to partial u by partial y delta t. And this I leave for you to show as a homework. You can work this out. So now so we have worked out everything in terms of the velocity, how the new position is looking in terms of velocity, and because of Taylor series we get these terms as derivatives. In particular, we saw that the length which is pulled in the x direction turns out to be partial u by partial x delta t. The length pulled in the y direction is partial v by partial y delta t, and the angle theta 1 is partial v by partial x delta t, and delta theta 2 is partial u by partial y times delta t. Now what we can do is the total movement of ABCD to A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime can be seen as a superposition of 4 types of motion. Let us see if we can identify some of these. So this was A, B, C, D, and this has now moved to, I've probably drawn it too big, A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime. This should have been slightly shrunken, but so now the first type of motion we can see is a translation from A to A prime by U delta t and V delta t. So first we can think of this as if this whole element ABCD has translated like a rigid body with no rotation to A prime, and now it will be not B prime, C prime, D prime, A prime, we can call it BI, CI, some points which are, so basically it will look like this whole element has translated from its original location to this one. So this is the first part. The second part we can look at it is as if there has been a rotation of the element. Now, rotation would mean that any element which is here at this position, it gets rotated by an angle. So now it was originally A, B, C, D, and it now gets rotated to a new position. We can call it A double prime, B double prime, C double prime, D double prime. So it gets rotated. Now in rotation, all lines will move by the same angle. Now the way we have defined our delta theta 1 is counterclockwise, and delta theta 2 is clockwise. Now the line AB rotates by an angle delta theta 1. And if we look at the top edge, which is the line A prime D prime, so this was AB, this moves, and A prime D prime, if we look at this has moved by an angle minus of delta theta 2 if we count counterclockwise as positive, because delta theta 2 is in the clockwise direction. So now this is for the line element AB and AD. So in fact I can even remove the prime. AB rotates by delta theta 1, AD rotates by delta theta 2 with a minus sign. So now on an average, the fluid element, what will be the rotation? or think of it as the central diagonal. If we see what is the rotation of the diagonal, so we look at the central line, and so the rotation of the diagonal, you will see, will be given by delta theta 1 minus delta theta 2 by 2. That will be the amount by which on an average this element would have rotated. And the rate of rotation will be equal to half of delta theta 1 minus delta theta 2 divided by delta t. And let us call this as omega, and omega of this fluid element will be equal to half, and if we look at delta theta 1 and delta theta 2 divided by delta t, what we will get is this will be equal to half of partial v by partial y minus partial u by partial x. So this is the rate at which this element would have rotated. Now once again, the rotation and translation should not be related to tau ij. Why? Because there will be no deformation of the fluid because of this. Now the viscous effects are seen because of the following two movements. The first movement, which we will see, which is the third step in the superposition, we have superposed two, and the third one is elongation along x and y direction. And the rate of strain along x, we had seen this will be equal to epsilon xx by delta t, and the rate of strain along x turns out to be partial u by partial x. And rate of strain along y, which will be equal to epsilon yy by delta t, will be equal to partial v by partial y. So these two things tell us the rate at which the element is getting elongated. Now, what will happen if partial u by partial x is negative? What does this imply? This implies that there is a contraction along this direction. Now, if we try to look at in the 2D case for incompressible fluids, the mass balance leads to partial u by partial x plus partial v by partial y is equal to 0. Now you see, if you relate it to this, the mass balance implies no change of volume of the material particle if density is constant. So if there is no change of volume, that means the elongation rates along the two directions, if we are looking at two-dimensional things, then du by dx plus dv by dy gives us the net product, the net rate being increased along x and net rate being increased along y. And if this has to stay at a constant volume, then the net increase rates have to be negative of each other. So it makes sort of in case if we have incompressible fluid, then the area of the rectangle, which is a material particle, should not change. And that would mean in an incompressible fluid we know del dot V is 0. So the rectangle will tell us partial u by partial x plus partial v by partial y is equal to 0, and the area of the rectangle will be preserved if these two are negative of each other. Okay. So these derivatives of velocity along the same direction gives us the rate of elongation along that direction. Now, the fourth element which comes is the shear or distortion. And the way to look at this is that if this is the element at A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime, so actually the origin should not be here. What I will do is let me remove the coordinate axis, because that gives an, then translation has already taken place. So I just remove the axis here, and now here what we can see is this shear or distortion is actually measured by this angle gamma. So gamma initially was equal to pi by 2, but in the distorted shape, gamma is equal to pi by 2 minus delta theta 1 minus delta theta 2. So now if we look at the rate at which gamma changes with time, and we try to find the average rate for the entire element, then what we see is the rate at which A prime B prime distorts or AB distorts, this is delta theta 1 by delta t, and the rate at which A prime D prime distorts, this is delta theta 2 by delta t. So once again, the average rate of distortion for the element, or we could think of it as the average rate of distortion for the diagonal, this will be equal to half of delta theta 1 by delta t plus delta theta 2 by delta t. Or this will be, you could add it up, so this will become equal to half of partial u by partial y plus partial v by partial x. Now, if we now try to, so these are the four different type of motions which can be superposed and which give us the new element as starting from A, B, C, D, we get to A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime. So we started from a rectangular element like this, A, B, C, D, and this reaches its new location, A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime, and we can treat it as a sum of all these four things. Now, let us look at the velocity gradients we see, partial ui by partial xj. These are the terms which are causing the distortion and extension, and hence these should be related to the shear stresses. And what we see is, if I take this dui by dxj and I split this into a symmetric part and a skew symmetric or anti-symmetric part, then what I can say is, I can write dui by dxj is equal to half of dui by dxj plus duj by dxi plus half of dui by dxj minus duj by dxi. And you can start seeing these things. What we do is we write this part as equal to small sij plus omega ij. Or maybe I can use the symbol capital omega because that is what most textbooks use. So I will not use small ij, I will use. So we'll use capital omega ij. Let's get back the pen here. So plus capital omega ij. Now Sij, which is the symmetric part, which is equal to half of partial ui by partial xj plus partial uj by partial xi. This is called the rate of strain. And this you will realize is basically what we had called as the average rate of strain, of shear. And omega ij is called the rate of rotation tensor. And actually, while this is a tensor, this has only 3 elements because all the diagonal elements are 0. So therefore, this can also be written as a vector. Whereas rate of strain which we have is a symmetric part of the velocity gradient tensor. And omega ij, this part does not cause any deformation. The deformations are caused only by the rate of strain part. So now what we have to do is we have to relate tau ij to partial ui by partial xj. Now what do we expect? Do we know anything about tau ij? Tau ij, firstly we know, of course, these are the stress parts or the shear stress, or I should actually call the viscous stress. It includes shear plus the normal part which is over and above the pressure. Now, are there any qualities of tau ij? We know tau ij is symmetric. And there's a second thing which we know about tau ij, that tau ij is a deviatoric tensor, which implies that tau 11 plus tau 22 plus tau 33, which is the trace, is equal to 0. In the last lecture, in one of the lectures, I had put T is equal to sigma 11 plus sigma 22 plus sigma 33, and by mistake I put it divided by 3. In that lecture, please remove that 3. But we know that tau ij, all the sum parts are 0. Now if tau ij, can we think of it any similarity with Sij, which is equal to half of partial ui by partial xj plus partial uj by partial xi. Clearly, both are symmetric. But you will see Sij does not have a 0 trace. S11 plus S22 plus S33 is equal to partial U1 by partial X1 plus partial U2 by partial X2 plus partial U3 by partial X3. Now this is 0 only for an incompressible flow. For a general flow, this is not 0. So what one can do is, if I look at this quantity Sij minus delta by 3 times delta ij, where delta is equal to S11 plus S22 plus S33. So I take the trace divided by 3 and subtract it from the diagonal elements. Then you will realize that this quantity, whatever this is, you call it, the trace of this is equal to 0. Okay. So now we'll we move on to the part of how tau ij is related to the velocity gradient. And here we will start making some assumptions. First, we will assume that there is isotropy in the fluid. Isotropy in the fluid means that stresses are not varying with direction of the fluid. For example, if I look at air or water and I look at any point along all the directions, the behavior of the fluid is uniform and the same. Now, can we think of any fluids which are not isotropic? So that can help us understand. Example of non-isotropic fluid could be solution of long chain polymer. So if there are long polymer type of things in the fluid, then the stress behavior along the length of the polymer and across the length of the polymer, across the area, cross-sectional area of polymer, these can be different. So such a fluid would not be isotropic. But if I look at air, water or any common fluid, then I see along all directions the behavior should be the same. There is no reason for the behavior to be different. So that is what we mean by isotropy. The second thing we will assume will be that the fluid is Newtonian. And now we will use Newtonian in a general sense, that stress is related to the velocity gradient in a linear way. That means there are no quadratic or non-linear terms. Only power of partial ui by partial xj to power 1. Nothing else. That is what we mean by a Newtonian fluid. So now, of course, as I said, we will generalize this, expand this. The third thing is that tau ij is only related to partial ui by partial xj, only the first, and not to higher derivatives of ui. So they are related only to the first derivative. And the fourth assumption we make is that there is no memory effect in the fluid, which means that as soon as there is a partial ui by partial xj, it is transmitted as a stress. So whatever behavior is done, it is done transmitted as a stress instantaneously. So there are no memory terms. When we make all these assumptions, then we will put tau ij as a function of dui by dxj, and this we will do in the next class, that we will then put tau ij as a linear function of partial ui by partial xj. And the reason why we have gone through so much detail is in the derivation is that in case you come across a case where these things are not met, then you will know where to deviate from this derivation. So what we have is we have assumed tau ij we'll put it as a linear function of partial ui by partial xj, and then we will see what happens to the Cauchy's equation or the momentum equation or Newton's second law for a particle, whatever you will call it. We will put this linear function of a dy by dxj in tau ij, and as we had shown earlier that we will relate this quantity. So as I said, we'll relate tau ij to Sij, because as we have seen that tau ij, the other part of dy by dxj. So now, since tau ij has to be related to dy by dxj, so what we will do is we will relate it to Sij, or the symmetric part of dy by dxj. Why? Because the non-symmetric part of this, or the skew-symmetric part, only causes rotation, and that we know doesn't cause the viscous stresses. So this has to be related only to the symmetric part, and this feeding in the of the symmetric part we will do in the next class, and that is what will lead us to the celebrated Navier-Stokes equations. Thank you.